So today let's talk about solving quadratics by factoring. Now the key to solving quadratics by factoring is this first little property or theorem that we have up here. It's called the zero product property, and hopefully this is something that you've heard before. It says for any real numbers a and b, if a times b equals 0, then either a has to equal 0, b has to equal 0, or both. And if you think about it, that should hopefully make sense. If you're multiplying two numbers together and the answer is 0, then one of them has to be 0, or both of them have to be 0. And that's the property that we're going to use throughout this little lesson here. So it says to solve quadratic equations, we're looking for numbers that will make the equation equal to 0. Okay, so one of the ways that we can do this is by factoring. So let's start with this example right here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try and find out, or what we're going to do is we're going to take this 12 right here and we're going to move it to the other side. So if I do that, the new equation becomes, pardon me, let's switch that. Let's get rid of that right there. All right, make it a little easier to see now. So if I move it over, you get x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0. So we're looking for any number that will make this left side equal to 0. So one way that you can do that is by factoring. So if I factor this, this becomes x plus 6, x minus 2. And this is where we're going to use the zero product property. The zero product property says if you have two items being multiplied together, which we do, we have this, and they're equal to 0, that means either one of them has to equal 0, or both of them have to equal 0. And so I solve that, so that means x has to equal -6, or x could also equal 2. And then those are my results, -6 and 2. Pretty simple. Let's try another one. Hopefully that made some sense there. Let's try another one though. Okay. What about this one? So if I'm going to do this one, let's see here. So same thing again. I'm going to move the 10 over. So I'm going to get 3x squared minus 13x minus 10 equaling 0. And then let's see what we can do to factor here. So let's see, 3x and x, and then feels like I should probably do a -5 here and a +2 there. And I think that should work right there. Oops, equals 0. Now we apply the zero product property. 3x plus 2 equals 0, and x minus 5 equal to 0. If I go through and solve all this, you end up with x is equal to -2/3, and x is equal to 5. And now how could you check that? Well, really easily, you could plug that back into the original. You could take this one and plug it back in up into x there, or you could take this one and plug it back in. And if you do plug it back in, either one of those or both of those, then the left side should equal 10. Or if you were to plug this back up into this spot right here, or this back up into this spot right here, then the left side should equal 0. So my final result, -2/3 and 5. Okay, so let's try one more. Let's see what happens here. Let's try one more. Alright, well, here we go. So again, I'm going to move everything to one side. So if I do that, I get 16x squared minus 49 equals 0. Now that hopefully you recognize is the difference of two squares. And that factors to be 4x plus 7, 4x minus 7. Zero product property says 4x plus 7 would equal 0. 4x minus 7 would equal 0. So if I solve both these, this one would end up being -7/4, and this one equal +7/4. So my answer, ±7/4. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. One last part that I want to kind of bring up, and this is something I have down here, just kind of a little bit of a note to ourselves. And this says that when the graph of a quadratic equation, it's a parabola. So when you factor quadratics, the numbers you are solving for are the x-intercepts. And hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, because where the x-intercepts are, that's where y is equal to 0. And sometimes these answers, all these answers that we're figuring out up here, okay, when we talk about, this answer here, these answers here, these answers here, sometimes they're called different things. They're called zeros sometimes, because when you plug them back in, it makes the equation equal to 0. Sometimes they're called roots, okay, or sometimes they're called intercepts or x-intercepts, because eventually when we talk about graphing parabolas, they turn out to be your x-intercepts. So I hope that makes sense. Hopefully all that we did wasn't too terribly difficult. There you go.